Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome back. It's Naomi Wolf, and I'm so delighted to be welcoming to outspoken Camilla Rees. Welcome, Ms. Rees.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you. Camilla Rees is a health advocate, a writer, and a former technology executive, best known for her work on electromagnetic radiation, safety, EMR safety, environmental health, and chronic illness. She is the founder and CEO of electromagnetichealth.org, an educational nonprofit. And here we have Ms. Stewart, an educational nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness. Well, uh, dedicated to raising awareness about the biological and neurological effects of wireless radiation, including Wi-Fi, cell phones, smart meters, and other modern communications technologies. Ms. Rees, there's a lot of electromagnetic radiation, or it's also called EMF, right? Electromagnetic frequency, same thing. Legislation in the news right now. What is going on?
Well, we're really at a very critical moment, Naomi. There are new proposed rules coming out of the FCC that are looking to completely eliminate all local government, state and local government rights over cell towers and antennas. Now, in 1996, the Telecom Act of 96 took away local governments' rights to influence the siting of these antennas and towers on health or environmental grounds. So that's been a big challenge for all these years. And right now there's an effort underway called 704 No More, initiated by Children's Health Defense, that is trying to dismantle that section of the Telecom Act, because it's absolutely not right that local governments cannot influence these towers on health or environmental grounds. But meanwhile, this FCC new proposed rules, they're trying to strip away all remaining local rights over zoning, aesthetics, how high, how many antennas, no notice, no environmental reviews. They just basically want to centralize control so that towers and antennas can go up right outside your home with no notice. They just appear. There's nothing you can do about it. And they don't want any local resistance, because their plan is extensive antenna densification, where they're going to put up these antennas and towers every 750 feet, I hear. And, it's to support, it's not for voice telecommunications, because we already have adequate for 4G. They're going up into higher frequencies so that this is about data collection and surveillance. And so then there's also a bill in Congress called, in the House, HR 2289, that has passed through the committee and is now going to be voted on by the House. And it is similarly trying to do the same thing, take away local rights. And then there are five or six other bills behind that one that have been proposed in Congress, all to enable wireless and to eliminate local control. It is outrageous.
That's shocking. So let me take a step back, if I may. I mean, truly shocking. The last time I did an electromagnetic radiation interview, it was with a specialist who did educate me about this, I believe, 1996 bill. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That basically allowed there to be the lack of consent that we see now. Although we still have some, as you mentioned, like, I think there are restrictions on, you can't put it right over a school, right? You can't put it right over a nursing home.
No. There are no such restrictions.
No such restrictions. Oh my gosh.
They go up anywhere, and you see these antenna farms on top of hospitals, cell towers on schools. No, it's got to stop.
Right. So the 96 law basically said this can go anywhere. I mean, I guess what I really remember vividly about that is that it said that, like, AT&T can put their tower on top of all these facilities in the middle of densely populated areas, and can't even, the town can't even force them to pay market rates for the siting. Is that correct?
Well, no, well, that is an issue within the bigger issue, which is that Section 704 of the Telecom Act took away state and local governments' rights to resist these towers and antennas on health or environmental grounds. So you could go to a city council meeting and talk about any other reason why you don't want this tower to go up, but you couldn't talk about the most important thing, the elephant in the room, which is
But you can't talk about it? They
You
muzzle
can't talk
citizens?
about it. No, they can't be considered. I've literally been shooed out of a city council meeting. You know, they wanted to get the guards to come get me because I said, well, I know you can't consider that in your deliberation, but you people have to hear about it, and the people in this room have to hear about it. It's just simply not been allowed. And that language was tucked into the Telecom Act in the dead of night before President Clinton signed it. So it was snuck in there. I know somebody who was in the room at the time, and who said money changed hands.
Oh, that's really extraordinary. There's a tower going up violating a scenic view shed in our house in upstate New York. And I wrote to the zoning board linking to all of these studies. No doubt I linked to your website. And I got crickets, no response whatsoever. Whereas I know that my neighbor's making progress saying, at least on the sides of it, saying this violates the view shed. So maybe that goes to your point that you're allowed to talk about the view shed, but you're not allowed to talk about cancer clusters.
Right, until now.
Leukemia.
And these new FCC rules won't allow you to talk about aesthetics. It won't be able to fight them on aesthetics. You won't be able to have any influence on them over aesthetics or anything else.
Shocking.
Yeah.
The other thing that really struck me, and obviously my interview is long out of date. This was like 5 or 6 years ago, but and obviously I didn't get it right the first time. Forgive me, but I was shocked when she said there's really no long-term studies of these devices, no safety studies of what it does to put them up. And maybe now there are, and they say bad things, but what are some of the key safety issues that are confirmed?
Well, let me tell you one thing, that there's plenty of research showing the biological and health effects that goes back over half a century.
Oh, really?
And from US government research as well. I co-authored a paper in February where we showed that the US Navy did a study published in 1971 by Dr. Zori Glazer, and they reviewed the research at that time from military and industrial circles. This was even before there was a cell phone industry. And they they showed the association with a range of different conditions, essentially forewarned of what became today's chronic illness problem.
Oh my God.
23 of today's fastest growing chronic illnesses were in that Navy report.
What?
So, yes,
what?
Yes. And so in addition to the Navy report, don't think it was just the Navy. There was a review of by the U.S. Army, the Air Force, the Defense Intelligence Agency, NIH with the Department of Energy, NIH with the National Toxicology Program. There's formal letter from the Department of Interior saying these exposure guidelines aren't adequate to protect wildlife. There's a letter from the FDA way back that said that there was an association with cancer. I mean, I could go on and on.
Oh my
There is
God.
plenty of science. And in fact, a lot of this science was presented in 4 years ago to the DC Circuit Court, which was the FCC was being challenged over not upgrading its exposure guidelines, given the voluminous amount of science that shows risk. Short-term risk, chronic risk, cumulative effects, all kinds of science, epidemiology studies. So, it's our government has been turning a blind eye to the risks. They have been enabling this industry, and it's got to stop, because it's gotten to the point where these towers are going up everywhere. People are hurting. People are suffering, Naomi.
Yeah.
They aren't functioning well. It's affecting cognitive function. It's linked to 10 different kinds of cancers now. Dr. Martin Paul wrote a paper linking it to, he said there's 18 different kinds of evidence showing a connection with early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, I believe it. Oh my God.
There's science showing that it causes antibiotic resistance. All these major issues that we are now drugging people. We're drugging people for all kinds of conditions. So it's driving up the drug costs. It's driving up the healthcare costs. It's a major driver of the chronic illness problem, and it's just being ignored.
Wow. So Ms. Rees, if I'm understanding you correctly, the whole kind of roster of hideous chronic illnesses that really bedevil doctors very often, as well as patients, malaise, fatigue, brain fog, that not to mention cancers, strokes, attention issues, cognitive issues, sleep issues, anxiety, depression, for which our teens are being medicated. This whole, and we're looking now that we've got RFK Jr. in HHS, looking at a whole range of things, the food supply, over medication, et cetera. A huge possible kind of trigger could be that we're being irradiated 24/7 in a way that is just alien to our biology
That's
by this
correct.
electromagnetic radiation.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's correct. It is one of the most important drivers of the chronic illness problem. It's not being focused on yet. It will be, I'm sure.
Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf of Outspoken and Daily Clout, and I want to tell you about gold. Every major financial collapse has been preceded by the same 7 warning signs: before the Great Depression, before the 1970s stagflation, before the crash of 2008, and now all 7 are flashing red again for the first time in over 15 years. American Alternative Assets just released a free report called the Bellwether Signal. It breaks down each of these signals and shows you how to protect your retirement before the next wave hits. In times of uncertainty, gold has always been the ultimate safe haven. It held strong in 2008. It surged during the inflation crisis of the 70s, and it remains one of the few assets not tied to political manipulation or central bank policy. Find out why central banks are buying gold and precious metals in record amounts and how you can too. Call 855-803-GOLD or visit cloutgold.com. That's cloutgold.com to get your free copy of the Bellwether Signal. That's 855-803-GOLD or cloutgold.com. Learn the signs, protect your savings, make your move while you still can.
Because it's just getting worse and worse as more and more people become affected by it and connect the dots. A lot of people aren't connecting the dots.
Right.
They think, oh, I've got a sleep problem, I'll just take a sleep medicine. Or I've got depression. I mean, there was a study by a American College Health Association a few years ago. They said 40% of the college students, 90,000 students, 40% of them had depression that was so severe that it was difficult for them to function within the past 12 months. The prior 12 months, and something like 64% of them had severe anxiety. So all kinds of conditions people are being treated incorrectly for. They're not looking, they're not turning over the stones where the origins of these conditions occur.
For sure. Let me just jump in and disclose I'm one of those people who suffers a great deal from electromagnetic exposure. I was alerted to this issue in 1985 when I didn't have a job, graduated from college, and I got a job editing a book. I don't know if it ever was published, but it warned about the electromagnetic radiation from computers, which were so new at that time. And it said that women were miscarrying when they worked at computers, that there was a cluster of miscarriages, recommended putting like lead aprons between women working at computers and the women in order to protect their fetuses. And I remember thinking, holy cow, that the science was so clear in this book. And again, I don't know if it ever saw the light of day. It was early days. But since then, I have been, so many times, more than I can count, unable to sleep. And then I found out that I'm right near an airport where there's tons of radiation coming off the planes, or unable to sleep, feeling jolts of like energy going through my body. And I find out that there's a new tower that just got erected where I am in the North Shore of Boston right now above a hotel. My husband laughs. People who don't suffer from this think it's invisible, and or he'll do things like, my kids do this too, holding the phone behind my head when my eyes are closed, ha ha ha, mom, you didn't feel that. But I can literally feel when he's left that device that you plug into the wall and it emits a sound. Maybe this isn't electromagnetic, but it's an energy field. Hello, Dr. Herbert. I'll be with you in 1 second. And it scares off the mice. I can feel that. I can feel when the electronics are on, and I could feel when they put a new transmitter, an electrical kind of transmitter, outside of our house. And I spent thousands of dollars to get our house upstate remediated. I'll show you. I don't know, I don't know if this stuff is real or not, or if it's the placebo effect. I feel much better, but it is real to me. I suffer it, I experience it, I feel it, and I'm thoroughly persuaded by the science. I go into places where people are densely cell phoned, and I can feel it. Or I've been in places where cell phones are jammed and I can feel it. It's a very horrible, unendurable kind of feeling. And I think a lot of people who are not attuned to the range of reactions to this might think, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, there's something stressing me out. Why am I stressed out? And not understand that they, should literally unplug their router, and take it from there. All right.
So definitely some people are more sensitive than others. Some people become more sensitive with cumulative exposures. And the surveys show about 3 to 10% are severe of Americans. 3 to 10% are severely impacted, with 35% being mildly impacted, where they might get a headache if they put a cell phone against their ear. But a large and growing, if you think of that we have 340 million people, 3 to 10%. We're talking about millions of people are being impaired. Quality of life is being impacted. Their ability to learn in a school is being impacted. Their relationships are being impacted because they're stressed and, frazzled. And and many of them aren't connecting the dots.
Right, absolutely. So welcome, Dr. Herbert.
Thank you.
I'm going to read your bio.
I am in a very rural place, and my initial attempts, I think, were sabotaged by that. And then I had to change computers. I mean, it's a good thing under ordinary circumstances not to have a whole lot of Wi-Fi around.
Right.
This is not. I mean, I want to comment on, I've heard everything you've been saying.
Ms. Herbert, Dr. Herbert, I just need to introduce you with your bio.
Yes,
Can you give me a minute? Thank you.
Sure,
Dr. Martha Herbert is a pediatric neurologist, neuroscientist, and autism researcher, best known for challenging strictly genetic explanations of autism and advancing a systems biology whole body approach to neurodevelopmental disorders. Now, please go ahead, Dr. Herbert, and respond to what Ms. Rees was saying.
Sure. I mean, I just want to comment, working backwards from what you were just talking about, Naomi, about your reactions to all of these things and other people not believing you and almost making fun of you. People don't realize that all living things operate with electromagnetic signals. These electromagnetic signals, however, are not standardized to this G or that G. They're constantly being modulated by the cell or the organism trying to regulate itself. And so what we have is this industry coming in and bringing in very high level standardized signals that have nothing to do with life. In fact, they're very anti-life. So it's a real problem. And people don't have any concept that that's what's going on. If you have a toxin that you can see, or a pesticide, or ingredients in food, you can get a grip on it. But to have the idea that you're dealing with something that is fundamental to life, and that it's being run roughshod over by, standardization, and then for purposes of not only, for surveillance and suppression, they're taking away the already existing underground copper cables and fiber optic cables for no good reason. They still work. They're trying to funnel us into something that has more hazards than these other things do, and to take away the control of that our Constitution protects. So we have to insist on, and not only that, I think one of the things that I think Camilla would have a lot to say about too is that in 1996, the FCC started having its regulations, and they basically said you can't talk about health in hearings, period.
Miss Rees was saying that before you joined
That
us.
might have-
Yes.
Yeah,
Very shocking.
I was there the whole time. I just couldn't get on.
Right.
But then the thing is now, they were told in 2021, did you bring this up already, or am I repeating myself?
Just keep going.
2021,
Yes.
2021, they were told by court to get caught up on the health research, which has been voluminous since 1996. And what was going on in 1996? Who was walking around with all these devices? So they refused to do so. And
Who's they? Who is they?
The industry. Telecom refused to read the FCC.
Well, the FCC.
Read the stuff. And the court had not given them a deadline. So now there are 2 lawsuits. And I think, and Camilla, you can speak to this very eloquently, that, until they do their homework, they have no business pushing anything on us.
And so they is, when you say they, you mean the telecom industry.
I mean,
and is it
FCC and the
telecom industry?
And they're tied up with military and surveillance and other things. So it's complicated.
Yeah, they haven't responded to the court. The court gave them no deadline, the FCC, and they are asked. They said, in light of the science, do you think your exposure guidelines are adequate in light of the science that was presented to the court, showing effects on children, long-term effects, environmental effects, and neurological, lots of different things they mentioned. So they're waiting for the FCC to come back to the court now to justify their exposure guidelines. And that's the second
And
issue.
now when you say they, you mean the telecom industry is waiting for the FCC to come back to the Supreme Court? Is that what you're saying?
No, there was a lawsuit brought by Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense.
Okay.
Challenging the FCC as to why it didn't upgrade its exposure guidelines.
Gotcha.
When it did a review.
Okay.
So they were sued, and thousands of pages of evidence for risk showing that the levels of their exposure guidelines are inadequate to protect biology were presented to the court. And so the court came back and said, come back to the court and justify your exposure guidelines.
But the court didn't give the FCC a deadline to do that?
That's correct.
So it's open-ended. Okay.
So what we're saying now is that in their response, instead of responding to their very inadequate exposure guidelines, their response has been to put new rules at the FCC they're trying to push through this month that would take away all local control. Their response has been to get members of Congress to initiate legislation that would also do the same thing, take away all local control and all reviews. And so so instead of responding, this is what they're doing, because
I see. They're doubling down in other areas. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to speak over you. Yeah. But the bottom line is the court said, even without a deadline, you need to justify this or update your guidelines. And rather than doing that, they're doing end run around the court through a different branch of government, through the congressional efforts and their lobbyists, and trying to ram through bills, as I understand it, 2 major bills that would allow several that would allow telecom to get rid of local control altogether. All right. Is that a fair summary of the state of play?
And so our position is this.
I'm sorry to keep jumping. Let me ask you guys to do something as the game plan going forward. And this is just our editorial guidelines. Assume that no one knows what you're talking about. Okay. Like, I know you spend all day with people who are deeply knowledgeable about who all the players are. So when you say they, we, just say, who is that? It's called ID in the journalism world. Okay. Go ahead, Camilla, please.
So activists on this subject, and there are many of them, there are hundreds of groups now, are saying that we should not be, the FCC and industry, they should not be allowed to do further antenna densification, putting up more and more antennas until they've replied to the court.
Okay, that's reasonable. Such a reasonable position.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are also constitutional problems with at least 4 of the things they're trying to push through.
And that was my next question, Dr. Herbert.
Yes.
Let me jump in and ask if I may. And forgive me if I talk over anyone. There's a little bit of a delay. I don't mean to be rude. So, um, immediately when Ms. Rees was talking about getting rid of local control, I thought of the Constitution because states have rights and municipalities have rights. Isn't that a constitutional issue? How can the federal government say we're running roughshod over Illinois or Marin County, California? We're just going to tell you, the FCC is going to tell you telecom has this right. Isn't that unconstitutional?
Yes, state and local governments, they should be able to protect their people. They should have state police powers. And the other thing that they're doing that's violating several amendments of the Constitution is because of Section 704 that took away local governments' rights to limit the cell towers and antennas on health or environmental grounds. Because of that, when people have been injured, when the cell tower goes up outside their house or their property value just devalued, went down by 20%, or their bees have been harmed, or their cows aren't producing milk, or they've had to move and have relocation costs, whatever the injury, several courts have decided that it's conflict preempted. So they're not allowed to legal recourse. They're not allowed to a jury trial, to just compensation, nothing. And you know what that does? It protects the industry from liability, because no insurance company will cover these telecom companies for health-related liabilities.
Wow.
None of them will. None of the biggest insurers in the world will not insure. And so they need to be protected somehow. So this helps them. But ultimately, there's going to be a big liability issue one way or the other for them. They've got to. I have some ideas on how, working with the insurance industry or working with insurance regulators to mandate that they cover these liabilities, in which case that would make the premiums go off the wall, off the charts for the telecom companies. They've got to feel the burn of the liability for all the harm that they're causing.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you're describing a situation very much like what happened to the pharmaceutical industry when the PrEP Act passed and you can't sue them for anything. If there's no way to hold them accountable through a lawsuit for the kinds of harms you're describing, nothing's going to stop them. But I'm also thinking, as you're speaking, what a brilliant way, if you want to drive down prices, if you're a real estate developer, just put a lot of, antennae up, everyone flees, you buy things up, if you're BlackRock or Vanguard, for pennies on the dollar, take the antennae off. I mean, it's such a way to intrude on free markets and intrude on people's assets and people's health. Go ahead.
Set up an AI center and use all the stuff you put in.
The contracts are usually about 25 years, Naomi, so they couldn't just take them down very easily. It's very hard.
See. Oh, they go up for 25 years?
Yeah, they're locked in.
No matter what science discovers, even if everyone drops dead around the cell phone tower. Extraordinary. So let me go to Dr. Herbert, if I may. And by the way, the people I interviewed 6 or 7 years ago were Environmental Health Trust. So if I got anything wrong from that interview, Environmental Health Trust, I apologize. But it definitely, the dystopia that we're seeing from what you both have just described was definitely predicted, by the person I interviewed from that organization, because there was impunity at that time. There was already, so many bad effects being documented. Let me go to Dr. Herbert. Dr. Herbert, your credentials are, really from some of the most important, prestigious, hospitals and universities in our country. You're really trained and you practiced in what some would call the belly of the beast in terms of conventional medicine, right? And conventional science. And yet you have been brave enough to have a wide lens on what's causing autism, a very contested, highly politicized question. And now you have a broad lens and you're willing to look at what the medical effects are of this EMF radiation, which has such powerful lobbyists behind it. What response have you had from Harvard Medical School, Boston Children's, Mass General, all of your colleagues in the belly of the beast, if you would?
Well, I'm not in the belly of the beast anymore. That partly I was fed up, and partly it was not possible to ask the questions I wanted to ask. Like, for example, I had a very strong reputation in the first decade of this century, and there was an opportunity. The Defense Department had an autism grant program. So I got a grant for studying infants with older siblings that had autism to see what we would find and what were the problems that went on. And I had a foundation offer me extra money to actually, because the money from the DOD wasn't enough. And then I took the grant, and then they pulled the money for no particular reason, even though they were always very friendly to me. So things like that happened. And then things in autism got much more controversial in the later part of the 2000s. So that, but I was never, pushing things very overtly. I was never confrontational. I was never any of those things. But I found that the research, at Mass General, I was working in the Martino Center imaging place, which was a 2-block, 10-story high place full of Siemens brain imaging and other kinds of imaging equipment. And, there was no support for work on children. So I had to go and get all of my own resources and raise money and do all kinds, which should have been the hospitals. The other thing that happened, the 2008 crash happened, and that really negatively affected the funding of most medical institutions in the country.
Okay, so now you're able to do the research you want to do because you're not getting supported by the belly of the beast.
Well, I'm not doing that kind of research anymore, but there's a lot of things I am doing.
Well, let me ask you. Okay, sorry. I understand. Thank you so much. So now drilling in on your interest in electromagnetic fields, what are you seeing in kids? What are your worries about, brain development, neurological issues? Dr. Herbert, what brings you to this moment? Why are you here, essentially? What are you concerned about?
I'm still working on EMF. It's not that. It's just that I'm not working with the big tools in the big center. The damage from EMF starts before conception because of whatever, potentially before conception, depending on the habits of mommy and daddy. Does daddy walk around all day with his cell phone in his pocket next to his testicles? Is he creating mutations in his sperm cells? With women, it's worse because the sperm cells have a 90-day cycle, but the ovaries have all the eggs they're ever going to have. And women just put their cell phone, their laptops on their bellies. And then when you have the baby, you put it in a room by itself with a
monitor
next to the head, and on and on. And it goes on like this. And then you wonder why there's a problem. I remember I finished my residency in 1996. And I had 2 part-time practices. Mostly I was doing research, and kids started coming in all messed up. And at that point, nobody was talking about autism, although I analyzed data from the very first autism brain imaging study that was ever done. And I found white matter enlargement up the wazoo in the high functioning kids. It got on the front page of the Science Times, that paper, but I had these kids coming in, and they weren't all autistic, but they were clumsy. They couldn't follow instructions. They couldn't stand on one foot. There was all this stuff that I just sent you. I sent you a 2-pager on this that I dug up, that I wrote 10 years ago. And no 2 kids were the same.
Right.
And it was just a mess. It was just a mess looking at these kids. And it took me a while.
Do you mean their brain images were a mess?
No,
their reflexes were a
there were
mess?
2 different parts. The physical exam was a mess.
Okay.
It wasn't catastrophic. It wasn't like cerebral palsy or whatever.
Right.
But it was just not right. Now, right now, I'm living in rural Tennessee.
Wait, don't skip.
Okay.
Don't skip. What happened?
What happened was I started going to neurotoxicology conferences and other things of that sort. And I should also say I was I was the vice chair of the Council for Responsible Genetics back then, which
Okay.
was the world's first GMO, genetic engineering watchdog group. It was quite
Okay.
prestigious at that time.
Right.
And I started putting together the toxicology and the genetic modification and um, and all kinds of things that I
So
would.
what was happening to these kids to
These
make them not
kids
able
were
to?
not being named anything except for the more severe ones.
Okay.
And I was
What was,
also, I was part of it. Seeing a lot of kids for a study. And at some point I started seeing their normal controls.
yes.
And that was 4 years into what I was doing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, they can do what I ask them. How does that happen? But basically, and then I started meeting parents with sick kids. So I don't want to
Okay.
go into that too much, but that was a real eye opener for me.
What was the difference between the control group who could follow directions and stand on one foot and the kids who were messed up in some way? What was the difference you were finding?
They were disorganized. I think I could put it in one word.
Let me try again. Was there something environmental around the kids with problems that made you decide to investigate electromagnetic exposure? Was it the GMOs? Do you not know what it was?
Well, no, there was no way. I mean, I asked them about that. I asked them about health things. What were they eating? What were their sleep habits? And, I did all of that. But at that time, I wasn't asking about EMF.
And so why, I guess I don't mean to be a pest,
I
but
understand. It's not
you're
the
here
kids that
now.
did it.
Yeah.
Yes.
What,
I was first introduced to the EMF issue not until 2002. It was pretty early,
right.
relatively speaking. I went
Right.
to a meeting on that in Santa Cruz, California, in the mountains, and I'm like, oh, and then it started growing on me.
Okay. Do you
And then
think the kids
I began to see the parallels between what I was learning about EMF and what I was learning about all the toxic and nutritional and microbiome
right.
stuff. So it all kind of
It all fit together. Well, we could spend hours on the food issue and the microbiome issue. We only have this brief time together to talk
But the
about
point
EMS.
I'm trying to make is that there's an overlap across all of these different
right.
insults.
Totally. And we've, we will do additional hours and hours on food. We've done a lot on food. HHS is doing a lot on food. What I'm asking you now in this time that we have, and duly noted, it's a bad Venn diagram, okay? Is there something about the problems those kids were having, or other kids, or other patients, or other adults, that led you to look at EMF? Could EMF exposure, whether in utero or as growing up, have contributed to the problem those kids were having?
Yeah, there was I'll tell you what happened. I wrote my book, Autism Revolution. It was 7th grade level. It was meant for parents who were in a complete state of panic. And it was written with a very good writer, and we wrote every word in that thing together.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a chapter in there on astrocytes. I built up from the kind of wet biology area. The astrocytes, rather than the neurons, were what I took as the kind of star of the show. And so then,
what's an astrocyte? What's an astrocyte?
So the neurons, and they're like white cells. People have, gray matter and white matter. They're part of the white matter.
Is that good or bad? Or
it's good. No, astrocytes are fantastic, but they can get sick.
Okay.
So I explain how they get sick in the chapter for the parents. And Cindy Sage, who's been on EMF, she was a co-editor of the first round and the second round of this whole publication, which Camilla knows a lot about, called Bio Initiative, which was a whole set of papers talking about the many aspects of EMF. And I'd been impressed with it when I read it in 2006 or 7. And then Cindy got me to write for it in 2012. But then, because of that chapter, she said, she thought that I could really nail it. So I wrote this giant 2-part paper with her. I wrote most of it, and she wrote the policy on the plausibility of the contribution of EMF.
Okay.
And then it's like paper. So, and you know,
Okay.
so that's
Can
what
you
I did.
tell me in a sentence, Dr. Herbert, how could theoretically EMF be causing problems for kids? Scientifically, what happens in the body?
Because every level that I had already learned about in the wet biology, the nutrition, all that stuff was impacted. When I went into the literature, there's 560 references there. I just reread it for this purpose. And it's totally parallel. It's not like there's different biologies for different insults. The body has a certain way of managing itself, and when you step on its foot, it gets hurt.
Right, right. Okay, got it. So basically, EMF exposure makes it harder for our cells and neurons to do their job. Meanwhile, they're being assaulted by toxins in the food, in the air, and so on. Is that the bottom line? That EMF
and
exposure?
toxins and radiation and
Okay.
radiation exposure.
All right. Thank you so much. So let me go back to Camilla. Camilla, you had a health journey that led you to explore EMF. You also come from the tech space. So both of you are deeply knowledgeable about different aspects of this problem. Tell us about your health journey and what led you to conclude that EMFs are something serious to focus on.
Sure. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I started to get very dizzy, off balance. Started getting, I couldn't function. I couldn't pay attention. I couldn't do my mail. I couldn't open my mail. I wasn't getting to my to-do list. Couldn't even write my to-do list. It happened over a matter of weeks. And finally, I realized there was something terribly wrong. I'd have to go a couple blocks and sit in a hotel to do my to-do list. And I put a query out on a listserv with scientists specialized in this area. And one of them said that she was coming to San Francisco the next week for a conference and would bring a meter. I asked, how could you measure? How do you know if this is what? It was right around the time where antennas were starting to go up and everyone was getting a cell phone. And so she brought a meter, and I figured out that the new neighbors who had moved into the apartment right next to me had put a wireless router right on the other side of the thin California wall from my pillow. So 2.5 months went by, and I was so disabled. I started feeling heart irregularities when I was lying on my bed. My neurological system just collapsed. One time I actually collapsed to the floor. I had to crawl to the phone to call a neighbor. And then I got the meter, figured out that there was a radiation coming from the other side of the wall, knocked on the door, said, hello, do you have a router by any chance? Oh yeah, that's our new office back there. So I said, could you turn it off for just a minute? So they turned it off, and I could really notice a difference. And so the writing was on the wall. I had to pack up and leave. There was no legal precedent. And it took me over a year to really fully recover from 2.5 months of a massive radiation exposure right next to my head. Most people are just exposed, if they use a cell phone against their head, they're exposed that way. But otherwise, in the wireless world, people aren't having this kind of high power exposure. But what happens is that over time, with these chronic effects and cumulative effects, people are starting to get just as whacked out as I was. Right. And fortunately, I did everything what I knew to do, and I got myself well. And it took a long time.
Thank God. Wow. And I hear you about cumulative. I mean, we just thinking about like microwaves or x-rays or any, like there's a whole spectrum of waves, right? Like different kinds of waves. And we know perfectly well not to expose ourselves too long to, x-rays or microwaves or, probably radio waves. And here's this electromagnetic radiation, which is a whole new thing in our environment, right?
There are also healing effects. This is an energy that can have negative effects or healing effects.
Interesting.
It's been used forever in like orthopedics for bone, to accelerate bone healing.
Right. Right. Wow.
So
but you're saying so much. Well, let me ask you something else. I have noticed, well, first of all, let me say I have a beloved 14-year-old in my life, and I went to his middle school graduation, and something is wrong. To validate what Dr. Herbert was saying, thank God he's fine, but his classmates, went across the stage and they don't walk normally. It's nothing like that's a crippled child. That child has muscular dystrophy. That child has, whatever, brain damage. No, it's like something's a little wrong with everyone. And they don't seem to have any kind of relationship to the physical world unless they're actual athletes, right? Out doing motor stuff every day. And they look sick. And so is it the food? Is it the aluminum in the 72 vaccines? Is it electromagnetic radiation next to their brains all day long? I'm bringing this to a pointed question. When I go to Best Buy, where they're around hot plastic and electromagnetic radiation all day. And when I go through TSA checkpoints where the people are working with these machines that emit, no doubt, a huge amount of electromagnetic radiation all day, what I notice is disruption in secondary sex characteristics. I'll just say it. The men look like they're losing testosterone. They're weirdly, they're holding fat in weird ways that, men don't typically hold fat. They have very little facial hair. And I see this disruption in the third generation. If you go back with men 2 generations, they look like they've got, and I know this, testosterone is dropping. So my question to you is, A, what is the mechanism whereby growing up with a cell phone attached to your head might be making all these kids kind of off? And B, is there an endocrine disruption or hormone disruption that is manifesting in this feminization or kind of weird demasculinization that I'm seeing?
Mm-hmm. Well, no question, there are endocrine effects. There have been many, many review studies, maybe 30 different review studies showing endocrine effects. But the most research that there is on terms of causation is on the oxidative damage, oxidative free radical damage. There's no question it's causing dramatic free radical damage. It's impacting the mitochondria. It's impacting the integrity of the membranes, like the blood-brain barrier.
Oh my God.
And the gut barrier, places they're supposed to be sealed tight. There is a displacement at the cellular level of calcium, which one of the scientists, Dr. Martin Pauls, thinks is really the root cause of all the rest of it. So it's
why? What does displaced calcium do in terms of the kinds of effects I was seeing visually?
It impacts what's called the voltage-gated calcium channels, and so it's Martha. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, but everything is being disturbed, and DNA is being affected. And one thing that many people don't really focus on it yet, haven't focused on yet, is the effect on water in our bodies. So we are mostly water, and water is actually a communication system. It's transmitting information. There's very frontier research on this, and so it's disturbing the molecules of water and creating a lack of coherence.
Oh no.
And it's kind of a long, complicated thing. Martha's very well aware of it too, but it's affecting everything. So from the water to the DNA to the calcium in the cells and transferring,
So Camilla, if I may, are you saying that the kind of holistic disruption of the organism of a teenager is so systematic when there's something on their bodies radiating them all day long that it could lead to this visible something wrongness a little bit with everyone that I witnessed?
Yeah, I think in terms of cognitive function, yes. I'm not sure about the other characteristics that you're describing that I've heard more associated with chemicals in the environment.
Gotcha. What about you, Dr. Herbert? Do you want to chime in?
Yes,
How do you see the EMF effect?
I think that all of the physical stuff, I don't want to repeat because it's all of it put together and interacting and, witch's brew or devil's, whatever.
Right.
But I do think that the amount of time people spend hovering over their gadgets, they don't do anything. I remember we had a 20-month-old in my infant study, and she was panicking, and so her mother handed her the cell phone, and she just started, and they do that all day, and they're not learning how to organize their bodies the way we would if we weren't doing that.
Right. Right.
Our body's in gravity, just like that,
Right.
you know.
Right. So basically, it's like degradation by omission. Our bodies are designed from babyhood on to learn and grow and move in space. And if we're like this all day long, apart from whatever the field is doing, our bodies are not learning. Just
Yeah, yeah.
even not just on a cognitive level, but even on a physical level, muscle memory level, bone level. Is that what you're saying, Dr.
I
Herbert?
am. You know, I live in a Mennonite community now. This
Oh,
goes
wow.
back 50
You're
year
hardcore.
history. No, it's my father moved to something. He wasn't Mennonite, but anyway. And when I came here to decide whether I was out of my mind or not to move here, the biggest thing that made me just absolutely come was hanging out with the little kids. I had extended conversations with 3-year-olds. I watched the agility of 1.5-year-olds. I watched, and then, you know, other gatherings, people were climbing and doing all kinds of things with no fear. I didn't see that at all. I just thought, wow, there's something different going, even though it's not perfect.
Right.
But they do chores.
Right.
You know, they have a real life.
Right.
I feel like our real life is being taken from us by these technologies. And then our ability, that's the electromagnetic technology, and the ability to take advantage of the opportunities. You don't even recognize it when you if you ever have it, you know.
Right. I understand what you're saying.
Psychologists are saying that the children today, they're so used to being stimulated, they want to be stimulated, that they don't have anywhere near the creativity and innovation that they would used to have, that they're just like waiting to be stimulated.
That's so heartbreaking. Yeah, I remember long rides in cars before devices and boredom. If I'd never been bored, I never would have written a poem, right? I never would have played a clapping game. I never would have, made up a story. I mean, boredom and the ability to like generate stimulation from inside your own imagination doesn't exist anymore because you can just, if parents hand them the device. Does this go to, I mean, when you're fighting the cell phone towers everywhere, are you also thinking about the devices in schools and how important it is to get devices out of schools so that kids can have some EMF free and, technological tyranny free hours in the day? Does that go along with your mission?
Absolutely. Many public schools used to be hardwired, and then they started putting in these wireless routers in classrooms. Some children I know have had to be homeschooled because they can't focus in the classroom.
Oh my God.
They also put cell towers outside of schools, and there was an interesting study at King Saud University in Saudi Arabia, where they looked at the rate of the hemoglobin A1C, the diabetes marker, in 2 different schools, 200 students, and they were one tower was higher power than the other much higher power than the other one, and they showed the connection with the hemoglobin A1C, and with the higher the power.
So all these kids getting diabetes could be the cell phone towers?
It is, and it's coming out. There'll be a paper coming out in the new year. I just heard that it's going to be published, and it is detailed biochemical analysis showing the influence of the electromagnetic fields on diabetes and prediabetes.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
but then
it's
why
huge.
that is huge, but then because that's like 1 in 3 kids now has diabetes, right? Why would it disproportionately be affecting lower income children?
Well, either there's more cell towers, there's more processed food, or both. In poorer communities, they don't get non-processed food.
That's true. I've lived in the South Bronx, and it's almost impossible to get non-processed food there. Wow.
So it's the most expensive cost of healthcare costs in America is diabetes.
Let me ask a very dark question. We haven't even gotten to this, but do you think that the proliferation of cell phone towers that, you're warning us about, could big pharma and big medicine kind of be in favor of it because it just generates more dollars for chronic disease? And talk about the surveillance piece of it, please, a little more before our time runs out.
Well, let me just tell you one thing. I don't want to speculate on whether the pharmaceutical industry is involved, but I will tell you that electromagnetic fields are known to have effects that amplify or suppress drug actions. So all these studies that have been done without electromagnetic fields, they're not telling doctors to ask their patients,
My
how much wireless are you
God.
around? And so they're giving doses that are possibly really wrong for them and maybe creating overdose conditions. I mean, that needs to really be looked into. So, and then the surveillance, Martha, do you want to talk a little bit about the surveillance issue?
Well, what can I say? I mean, surveillance is a really big issue right now with we have our phones being, tracking what we're doing, everything you put on Google, everything you get. I even got my first warning on Microsoft yesterday that if I went to another paper I was going to go to, it would be dangerous information, you know. And then we have all these AI things where they're lying to us after they find out what our interests are.
Right.
And I can't, that's another conversation altogether, but it's really a big deal. And
Well, I guess what I mean, I'm sorry. Sorry, Dr. Herbert, go on, please.
okay. Well, I'm really concerned about the push to put so many resources into AI, including electrical and wireless and water. I mean, it just seems like, and without a real proof that it can do what it says.
Right.
I think that we're in for a very rough ride, and we have to be on it.
Understood. Let me ask the question in a different way. Do all these cell phone towers not just make your phone connection better or let you live stream, a video from your phone better, but also you mentioned data harvesting, Camilla, and you're from the tech world. Do they also make it easier to geolocate someone, to, scan their biometrics, to, switch them off if there's ever central bank digital currency? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I was just on an interview the other day with Scott McCullough, who's the attorney on the EMF project at Children's Health Defense, and 704 No More, and the Stop 5G program there. And he said that, we already are offended by all these cameras, following us, as we go through life. But they're not even going to need a camera. You don't even need to have a cell phone. With these frequencies, they're going to be able to map your body, put the image into AI, find out exactly who you are. I mean, it's so invasive.
Bingo. You've answered the question. It's the Internet of Things. I was in a Tesla, and you can see these shadow silhouettes of human beings who may or may not be, having their cell phone activated by the Tesla technology, but it sees all the humans around them, all the cars around them. I'm sure this technology, can feed in my facial recognition or my iris or my fingerprint or whatever and say, oh, there goes Naomi Wolf, even if I leave my phone at home. Isn't that the possible control grid that's being created?
They have too much power. These technology companies have too much power. They need to be stopped. We need to have societal conversations about privacy and about radiation and we need to hardwire as much as possible.
Yeah.
So if we there was an FCC analysis that the former chairman of the FCC, Tom Wheeler, mentioned in congressional testimony a couple of years ago. He said that they did an analysis and showed that the industry the government had subsidized in the past $40 billion for wireless in the past 10 years. And it would have taken the same amount of money, $40 billion, to hardwire 98% of the homes in America. They are using an inferior technology instead of a superior, safer, faster, more energy efficient technology. And so the whole trajectory is wrong. And our government has not been adequately, regulating this industry and supporting our country's needs. So many other countries in the world are going to almost all fiber. And we're less than 50%. And most of it's only to office buildings and not to homes. They want wireless here.
Right.
They want to be able to spy on us, to collect data, to profile, to control, it's got to stop.
Oh my God, well said. Brava to both of you. Now, before I let you go, you said you healed yourself. Tell me exactly what action steps you want my audience to take, and people who are feeling suicidal right now, what can they do to protect themselves and their families
Yeah,
personally?
the first thing to do is you have to remove yourself from the exposure. You cannot expect to get well if you're still being exposed. So I removed myself. There was no doctor then, or very few now, that can guide you. I followed my instincts. I went inside and I asked myself, what do I need? And the messages were I need sunshine,
Mm,
I need movement,
mm,
and I need living foods. So I went to a raw food retreat for
mhm,
months. I
mm.
swam laps outside in San Diego
Wow.
sunshine every day at 12 noon.
Mm.
So I got my sunshine, I got my exercise, and I did living foods. That's what my
Wonderful.
instincts told me that we need to do. We
And,
need to
and you
get the.
did you unplug your devices from the router?
Oh, I didn't even have a router. I was being affected by. I was hardwired in my apartment.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was the neighbors.
Right.
So yeah, you have to minimize these exposures at every opportunity. I do not use this. I own a cell phone. I use it maybe once a year for an emergency.
Huh.
I would never use it against my head.
Wow.
I do have an iPad that I can turn it on and then I
Right.
turn it off. It's a
Right.
choice, I
Right.
minimize it.
Gotcha.
But you
Gotcha.
got to
All
get
right.
the communication systems in your body working better. Those
Right.
regulation systems, you got to get it through high vitality food, through sunshine, through exercise, that in order to get that homeostasis balance
Right.
back.
And then who do you want them to call to stop these bad bills?
So what I want them to take action on the FCC proposed rules, which is called 25276.
Mhm.
There's also a House bill 2289,
Mhm.
and there are 5 or 6 other bills behind that. But you want to go to 704nomore.org, hit the take action button, and it will take you
Perfect.
to all the places that they can take action, 5 or 6 different
Wonderful.
things that people can do. And I hope that they do.
Okay, thank you. Perfectly said, Ms. Rees. Now, Dr. Herbert, what are your parting words? What should people do, both personally and politically, before I say goodbye?
I think those of us who understand what's going on and need to be both compassionate and educational in a kind way to the people who don't get it yet, and
Mhm,
maybe they can see what's at stake in what's
mhm,
going forward. The stakes are enormous. I'm
mm,
personally worried about the bees. The bees are being
mm,
taken out. We could have a total ecological collapse from no more pollinators.
mm,
That's a huge thing. So
mm,
people need to kind of be somewhat gently, but still firmly, saying, "Look, this is a
mm.
really big deal."
Yeah.
And we need to figure out not to be browbeating people, but to
Mhm.
compassionately bring them in to this awareness.
Okay, beautifully said to both of you. You've been so generous with your time. I couldn't have better interlocutors sharing, the political, the personal, the emotional, the cognitive, every level of this very important, urgent subject. We'll mobilize our teams and people to do just as you said, 704nomore.org. Is that correct,
Correct.
Ms. Rees? Great. And I want to thank you both, and please come back soon. And we're just really grateful to you. I'm going to say goodbye to you and remove you from the studio and thank our sponsor. Thank you so much. All
Thank you,
right.
Naomi.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to say goodbye to you. How do I do that? Oh dear. There we go. And goodbye to you. How do I do that? There we go. And I'm thanking our sponsors so much. Wow. Well, you heard it here first. This should be on the cover of the New York Times. It's not. It's me and Outspoken and these brave women and the podcast that they go on, because they are no doubt much banned. But you need to support the media that brings you the truth and brings you the real news. So, in addition to that, when you support our sponsors, you support this media, and they're also awesome sponsors. Um, and one of them is American Alternative Assets. What do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They are making the same shocking prediction that gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs says that gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says it'll be 25%. And one respected economist now believes the US government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players are already making their moves. Now you can see exactly what they're seeing and do it for free. Our friends at American Alternative Assets just released a powerful new report, The Surprising Case for $10,000 Gold. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and the way that smart Americans are protecting their retirements with gold right now. Go to cloutgold.com to download this for free or call 855-803-GOLD. That's cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. And don't wait. The window for this opportunity is closing fast. You guys, it's really important. Brian and I often say that if we had invested $1,000 5 years ago, when we first heard about the importance of getting off the digital currency control grid and diversifying into gold, we would have quintupled our investment. So let's not make that mistake in 5 more years. Look back on this moment. Now is the time. And you've really got to go ahead and invest in gold and precious metals, or at least diversify for God's sake. And that's American Alternative Assets, cloutgold.com. I love you guys. Please donate over at Outspoken, Substack, or over on Daily Clout. Your donations or subscriptions keep us going. Love you. We're at 135 in the news commentary rankings on pod status in the US and in 9 other countries around the world. Keep sharing, subscribing, and tuning in to bring us up into the top 100. We'll keep making an impact. Thank you. Love you. See you tomorrow.